如果有一天我走了，你会像马达那样找我吗？
会啊。
会一直找吗？
会啊。
会一直找到死吗？
会啊。
你撒谎。
Hello everybody, my name is JorgeAlcocer, and today I'm going to be doing an analysis of the film Suzhou River by director Liu Ye, released in 2000. The film paints a fine line between what is perceived as reality and imagination through the use of dynamic points of view and mirroring plot lines. The use of these different cinematic techniques help capture Liu Ye's perspective of the modern-day Shanghai. The film revolves around the romantic relationships between Madar, a motorcycle courier, Modan, the daughter of a vodka smuggler, Mei Mei, a nightclub performer, and the narrator/videographer. The story begins through the eyes of the narrator, who we see is riding down Suzhou River, and we see through his eyes the state of the riverside. We see shots of dilapidated buildings and the dirty, murky water. Our narrator states that Suzhou River tells multiple stories, which makes it the filthiest river. This evokes a feeling to the audience of what we will be expecting to see throughout the film, a sense of murkiness and deterioration. The narrator says that he is a videographer and claims to film anything as long as he's paid to do so. Although, you may not like what you see, because cameras don't lie. The narrator is never shown physically, and is only constructed through his monologues performed as a voiceover in certain scenes throughout the film. Making the story be told through his first-person view using his camera shows the importance of the camera points of view in constructing the story while capturing the narrator's own personal perspective of the events unfolding before him. This gives the narrator the control and ability to manipulate what the audience is allowed to see, forcing onto us his limited perspective onto the events. The narrator gives us a glimpse into his own reality, one which he cannot change. He is only given the ability to manipulate what he shows us, but he himself cannot change those events that have happened. When the narrator meets Mei Mei, and later starts going out with her, we see how the narrator's perspective begins to be juxtaposed with a third-person narrative as we see him telling the story of Mei Mei using his camera. Eventually, Mei Mei tells the narrator the story of Madar. The narrator serves as the connecting point between the beginning story in first person to the now third-person narrative telling of the story of Madar and Modan. Being the only one who narrates Madar's and Modan's story allows him to create his own imagined story. We see examples of this when the narrator, whilst narrating the story, says things like, "What else? Let me think," and "What if?" The use of these words shows how there is a lack of credibility and truth to how the narrator is retelling the story of Madar and Modan. This creates an imagined and fantastical setting in which Madar and Modan now reside.
那他以前是干什么的呢？让我想想。他看上去26、27岁的样子。他以前，也许。
The third-person points of view, as well as the warmer lighting seen in certain scenes, is used to dictate Madar and Modan's story as an intense, romantic relationship between the two within a controlled atmospheric scene. This suggests that Madar and Modan's relationship is the stereotypical love story. However, it is only fiction and contrasts against the reality of the narrator and Mei Mei's relationship. Their relationship, in contrast with Madar and Modan's, is characterized by close-up, almost suffocating shots that create a claustrophobic and deteriorating feeling to the narrator and Mei Mei's relationship.
那个老毕你认识吗？
我不认识。
你认识啊？
不认识。
那个老毕后来也死了，警察追他的时候就从这幢楼里跳下来给摔死了。
他也死了。
对。
然后呢？他会怎么做？我也不知道该怎么继续下去。也许这个故事就应该在这里结束了。不过，也许马达可以自己继续这个故事。
When Madar re-enters into the current timeline along with the narrator, it allows for the plot of the Madar Mudan story to commence once again, only this time, Madar is the one in charge of telling the story and takes away the narrator's control. At this point, the lines between reality and imagination are starting to blur, as the narrator's world, which we have perceived as reality, and Madar's world, which we have perceived to be mostly fictional, are starting to collide and overlap with one another. In certain scenes, we see Madar assuming the first-person point of view, similar to our narrator's point of view, and we occasionally see them interacting within these scenes. Both characters share similar experiences, as we see the narrator searching for Mei Mei within the crowds of Shanghai during her disappearances, and Madar, who is searching for his lost lover Mudan. The narrator and Mudan are beginning to share similar points of views within the narrative, prompting us to question what is imagination and what is reality. When Mei Mei begins to interact with Madar, Madar believes that Mei Mei is Mudan. Mei Mei and Mudan are almost exactly identical, different only in how they're dressed and how they act. Both characters are actually played by the same actress, Zhou Zhan. Mei Mei at first pushes away Madar and rejects his idea that she is Mudan and doesn't really believe Madar and Mudan's story, much less her own role within that story as a replacement for Mudan. In that sense, Mei Mei rejects the idea of such a romantic and almost fantastical love story, believing it to be fictional.
他长得什么样？
两只小辫子，红白格的运动服，黑球鞋，黑裤子，黑的背包。
还有呢？
还有就是他左腿上有一朵牡丹花的图案。
你怎么了？像那样的牡丹花，满街都有卖的。
你有吗？
我没有，我又不是你的牡丹。
After Madar has a conversation with the narrator, he ends up finding Madan at a 24-hour store that sold buffalo grass vodka. They get drunk, and together, they fall off a bridge to their deaths. After the deaths of Madar and Mudan, we no longer see the third-person point of view, and the rest of the film plays out through the eyes of the narrator. The narrator is asked by the police to identify the bodies of Madar and Mudan, and after seeing their bodies, runs off to find Mei Mei to tell her what happened. Mei Mei was pushed into a fantastical romance when she had a sexual encounter with Madar, believing that she could be Mudan and caving into the desire for a fantastical love story. However, she is brought back into reality when she sees the cold, dead bodies of Madar and Mudan, realizing that Madar never loved her, but rather loved Mudan.
如果有一天我走了，你会像马达那样找我吗？
会啊。
会一直找吗？
会啊。
会一直找到死吗？
会。
你撒谎。像这样的事情，只有爱情故事里才会有。
你不信？
不行。真的。
Mei finds herself disillusioned about reality and love, discovering that reality does not have the capacity to harbor the extravagant and nonsensical thing that is love. Finally, after the conversation Mei has with the narrator, which ties back to the beginning voiceover, we find out that Mei has disappeared, leaving behind a single note that reads, "Find me if you love me." We then see the narrator on a boat drifting down the Suzhou River, drinking a bottle of buffalo grass vodka with the affirmation that he is not Madar and will not go find Mei. In a way, Madar represents a better, idealized version of the narrator who does embark on a journey to find his long-lost lover. However, it is only an idealization from the narrator, and not something he believes he can become, since he is only a narrator, tasked with only showing us his experiences, unable to manipulate the story happening in front of him, even if it happens to be his own, which is why he sits and waits for the next story to start. Before the video ends, I'd like to point out a few connections between the film and how it correlates with modern Shanghai. A connection we can make between the film and the culture of Shanghai is Mei's character and how she ties in with the idea of the modern girl living in Shanghai. She smokes, works at a nightclub, and drinks beer, characterizing many of the classifications used for modern girls who lived on speed and stimulation. In accordance with how we view this film and connect it with modern-day Shanghai, there are a couple of key elements shown throughout the film that illustrate this comparison. For one, there are many shots in the film showing the dilapidated riverside of Suzhou River, which can cause a bit of a shock to the viewer, as Shanghai is often referred to as the Paris of Asia, and is one of China's largest cities, responsible for generating a large amount of China's wealth. This coincides with the overall message of the film. What is imagination and what is fantastical? What is reality and what is tragedy? The unfortunate truth is that despite Shanghai being such a large, beautiful city, it is still stricken with poverty and wealth inequality.